On to India and a quick roundup of the Indian Union budget that was presented earlier today. Let's get you the top 10 highlights now from the Indian budget. Breaking it down for you one by one. First, to the taxes, no change in the current income tax slabs. However, a 2-year window will be given to file tax returns. In a major decision that will affect crypto and NFT gains, the Indian government announced any digital asset transfer will be taxed at 30%. In another first, the Reserve Bank of India will be issuing a digital rupee using blockchain technology. On the defense front, the Indian government has made a strong push for self-reliance. It has opened defense research and development to startups now. Another key takeaway, e-passports with embedded chips will be rolled out for the ease of international travel. Additionally, a national tele-mental health program will be launched. In the telecom sector, India announced the rollout of the 5G mobile services within the next financial year. And in a big boost to the electric vehicle sector, a battery swapping policy will be introduced. India's GDP is estimated to grow by 9.2%, the fastest rate among major economies across the world. And we got in perspectives from Sanjeev Sanyal, who is the principal economic advisor to the government of India. Listen in to what he had to say on how the budget will be boosting growth in the infrastructure and the employment sector.
As you know, that a lot of effort has gone into this budget in terms of putting spending into infrastructure. And this is a government with now a fairly good record in terms of being able to deliver on building highways, airports, and so on. So it's not something we've just pulled out of the hat. We have a record of doing it, and we are willing to put money behind it. So I think that should be quite clear. It's not just about the next coming year, by the way. It's a commitment over several years. So we are quite confident that we will be able to deliver as far as building that infrastructure is concerned. Now, why is this important? It's important because we have taken a strategic call that one of the ways in which we want to keep the economic momentum going is by building infrastructure, which is something, of course, this country needs. But this is also one of the fastest ways of generating jobs. And there's more than adequate evidence that this is a good way of creating jobs, creating domestic demand, and, of course, leaving productive capacity in terms of the infrastructure when it gets completed. So this is a very important part of our strategy. The other part of our strategy is to get private investment going again. Of course, public spending is part of crowding it in. But of course, for the very first time in many years, we have a banking system that is clean, it is recapitalized, and we have a lot of money being raised recently through IPOs and other forms from the capital market. So financing is fully available and can be deployed as and when the energies, the creative spirits of the private sector come back. Finally, I would argue there are parts of the economy that are actually doing quite well already. Whether it's the exports, particularly services exports, there are certain other parts of the economy, particularly related to technology, but also even real estate is coming back quite strongly. So there is I would say there is a good momentum building back. This does not mean that every sector is back. And in the economic survey yesterday, we did specifically point out that contact-based services, not surprisingly, continue to be impacted. They are still below where they were pre-COVID. And clearly, that's a sector that requires some love and care. And you saw that in the budget. The finance minister did announce a special package of 50,000 crores for providing liquidity to hotels, for example. But ultimately, this sector requires that it is open. And here, our vaccination program is, in the end, the best economic antidote. ultimately we have to be in a position that if future waves of COVID come, we are able to deal with it without having to go into lockdowns. Because as long as we can open up the contact-intensive services, I'm quite confident that growth will indeed come back to those sectors quite fast.
It has been said that if India can maintain 8% growth over the next 5 years, the country will become a $5 trillion economy. We asked Sanjeev Sanyal how optimistic he is on that front.
First of all, let's not get into 8 years. Let's more near term. The issue is, can we sustain growth over the next year or two at those levels? Our forecast in the economic survey suggests that we will do between 8 and 8.5% GDP growth in the coming financial year, on top of the 9.2% we have done this year. Now, let me remind you that this is actually a conservative forecast. The IMF and the World Bank, both of them have much stronger forecasts. The IMF just came up with a forecast 4 days ago, and they expect the Indian economy in the next financial year to grow by 9%. So we are being conservative, but even with these conservative numbers, we will still be the world's fastest growing economy. So I'm quite confident that we will do quite well. Now, obviously, there are always risks, geopolitical risks, global supply chains, and so on. But we have, a reasonable confidence that the macroeconomic buffers we have built up, particularly foreign exchange reserves, will stand us in good stead.
Tax incentives have been announced for startups along with measures to promote ease of business. We asked the principal economic advisor what this would mean for foreign investment into India's startup economy.
Well, foreign investments have been flowing in quite strongly for quite some time. Even at the worst period of the COVID pandemic, we were seeing reasonably good inflows of FDI coming in. And so, there's good reason to expect that these are reasonably stable flows. But in addition to that, let me say that India is now quite clearly the world's third largest startup ecosystem. And again, if you look at last year's, or rather this year's economic survey, we did make a very interesting point, which is that not only are there startups happening in the usual suspect places, which is Delhi NCR or Bangalore or the Mumbai-Pune corridor, but you're also seeing more and more startups popping up all across the country. In fact, we put a map up yesterday, which showed that in the first 9 months of the year, there were 555 districts which had at least one startup. And when I say startup, I just don't mean any newly registered company. When I say startup, it does something that is technologically or otherwise innovative and has all the usual characteristics of a startup. So clearly, in sort of an entrepreneurial culture is building up in India. And so, of course, we want that culture to be encouraged. And we hope that, we've had a whole slew of unicorns later, but hopefully that is a pipeline. It's not just about this particular point in history.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.